Okay, hi everyone. I just wanted to go over a couple things that we've been working on that we worked on last week and that you're going to be working on this week and reading about. So first of all, the beginning of your story, and you guys have all begun a story now. Congratulations. That story has grown out of exercises you've been doing or notebook, thoughts and uh, exercise you've been doing in your notebook as well. So that's great. And what you are working towards with your beginning, and remember, a lot of times your beginning is going to be found like 3 paragraphs down in your draft. Okay, so whatever draft you've written, go down 3 paragraphs and see if your story doesn't actually start around there. You want to start with, the real tension, right? What's the unsettling moment in your story? What's going to, spur your characters forward? So we want to have a sense of who those characters are, the relationships amongst them, and the underlying situation. So that conflict is pretty much immediate, right? In medias res, which means in the middle of things, that's where you're starting. So that, your character's already in an imbalanced state. And if you notice the model stories we've been reading, just see how they're starting, see how the characters are, about to get into trouble, right? So, a story arc starts with a character in an unsettled state and ends with a character who has somehow resolved that state. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is resolved at all, right? But there's some huge change that's taken place. And we'll touch on that a bit when we get to plot. The setting is really important. Metaphorically, the setting reflects whatever is going on thematically in your story. So remember too that people exist in space, right? They touch objects. Objects tell a lot about who they are. If you walk into somebody's house for the first time, you're going to notice certain things about their living room or their parlor, right? Do they have a chandelier? Do they have a few tin cans created into a scone, right? A sconce, sorry. How are they, how does it smell, right? Think about all your senses. Think about the visual, the olfactory, the tactile, right? The gustatory will come in there too. That's the sense of taste, but probably less so if you're just walking into a room. But all of those senses are present, and they're present in the objects as well. Give us a reason to keep reading. And that has everything to do with tension. Okay. So, if you're setting up a situation in the beginning where we're asking questions like, what's going to happen? What does she really think? What's going to be revealed? Then we're going to keep reading. If we're just getting somebody sort of, meandering on their front porch for a bit, we're probably not going to want to keep reading. Okay, so decide which of these tasks your story's not accomplishing yet. You're beginning, and when you're looking at a peers, you can do the same thing. Circle and make notes for yourself on how you might address the issues you've identified. So, as you go back to your own story beginning, think about, which of these you're not yet getting to. Now, let me talk about character. So one important, and this is your big takeaway on character, right? Contrasting traits. If a character is all good and everything that character does is just heavenly, not very interesting, right? We don't feel we know that character because there's nobody that exists on earth who is all good. Aside from what we might think of certain people in our lives, nobody is all good, right? There's always going to be some contrast. Now, that contrast should be something surprising and yet also convincing. And if there's one thing you walk away from this class with, it's that motto: surprising yet convincing. Okay, so characters should surprise us, but it should also be within their character, the range of their character, right? So, if you have a woman who's incredibly competitive, cutthroat, but she also helps a blind man across the street, there's a contrasting trait. But then you're going to develop that trait in other things, right? There are going to be times where she stops, she limits herself because she has this one gentle feature to her. And that will inform her character, and it gives your character dimensionality. Same thing, you can't have a character who's all bad either, right? Again, choosing contrasting traits so we have a sense of the range of that character. Plot, and that has everything to do with character, particularly in literary fiction. The plot grows out of character. So your character will not be the same in the end of your story as he or she, they were in the beginning of your story, right? There's some monumental change that has happened, and it can be very subtle. It's not that somebody just dies or wakes up. In fact, it should not be that. Those are easy ways of, creating change. It must be that there's some intrinsic change within the character. Setting, and I touched on that. You really want to establish your setting. Where is this character, and how much does the setting tell about the character? When a character is in dialogue with another character, they are touching things, right? They're moving things around. They're, leaning back. They're looking out the window. What are they seeing? Getting in figurative language so that we're, how does that character see, for instance, the landscape outside that window? What would he or she compare that landscape to? And then finally, point of view, which is also an important choice that you're making, right? Most stories we read are going to be in first person or close third person, but there is also, objective point of view, right? Where you're basically just reporting. I think of Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, if you've read that story, where you're just getting sort of a report of what's happening. The omniscient is where you can go into anybody's head and tell us what's going on. But again, first person point of view and third close person, where, really it's very close to the first person, right? We're only seeing from one person's point of view, but you're using he, she. First person, you're using I. Okay. And, what do those different points of view afford you? Right. So for instance, magic words got us to we could move around. We were shifting perspectives, but we were in close third person with each perspective, that we shifted into. Okay, so that's another way to approach this. It's tricky. That's very tricky. And I saw a few of you wanted to do that, want to try that out. Go ahead, try it out. It can be hard, though. It's hard to affect. So the one that you're going to be probably the most comfortable in is either first person or third person. Okay, I just want to remind you to please comment on your peers. If a peer does not comment, or if a peer does not post, then go ahead and comment on a peer from a different group. But you do need to comment on your peers from the previous discussion board.